Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. Through the first couple of weeks of Warzone Pacific being live and us having obviously Caldera and all the Vanguard weapons in the game, we saw a ton of updates go live, right? Like we saw like 5 or 6 title updates go live in the span of like 10, 15 days, something like that. It was pretty much updates every other day at the least. A little bit overwhelming, but a lot ended up changing in that time. And then because of the holidays, Christmas, New Year's, all that stuff, every single year, obviously the devs go on holiday, they go on break during that time. And during that, we didn't really see any updates. We're still in that time period right now. But when the devs come back to office here at the start of the new year, we're gonna see a lot of new updates go live, specifically when it comes to weapon tuning, because it seemed like with a lot of those patches early on, we were seeing Vanguard weapons tuned, Cold War weapons tuned, even some Modern Warfare weapons tuned, but then it was all paused for the holidays, and it's going to resume here once the devs are all back. And today I wanted to take a look at how the meta is likely going to change with the next tuning update and what you can expect is going to be buffed, what's going to be nerfed, everything like that. So as we go through it all, if you enjoy the video at any point, let me know by dropping a like on it. It would be seriously appreciated. And of course, if you're new to the channel or if you have not already subscribed, just around 58% of viewers watching are not subbed to the channel yet. So if that's you and you want to stay up to date with everything, news, updates, loadouts, tips, it's all right here. So feel free to subscribe with your notifications turned on. So initially here, I want to start our conversation on Warzone Ranked, which is great for seeing what the current meta sort of looks like, what weapons are being used the most in terms of overall popularity amongst the entire player base's loadouts. Then also the weapons that have the highest KDs and the best stats. And that's a particularly interesting category to look at. We'll get to that at some point later on into the video. But first, I want to take a look at the pick ratio weapons, because this is something that's always been a very, very common theme with what weapons are being tuned, either buffed or nerfed, because Raven's ultimate goal is to have the most diverse meta possible. Most of the time. Obviously, in some cases, it does seem like they're favoring certain things. Throughout Cold War, we noticed a very big uptick in Cold War weapons being more dominant than Modern Warfare weapons because that wasn't the current game. I would expect over the course of time, quite a few Vanguard weapons to become significantly better than they are now so that they have a better chance of competing or even being more competitive than some of the older Cold War and Modern Warfare weapons. But if we go ahead and we look at this now, we can even zoom in a little bit here. As far as the pick ratio goes, the #1 most picked weapon in the game right now is the MP40, and it actually has above average for a KD as well. 1.18 is pretty solid. 0.9 to 1.1 is usually that average KD, I believe, is what's been sort of determined over time, but an 11% pick rate, and that's actually going up. Pretty popular, not the most popular weapon we've ever seen in Warzone history. DMR, FFAR, AUG in previous seasons have been pretty abused, to say the least, but the MP40 right now is definitely dominating the SMG category. So I would not at all be surprised if we see some slight tunes to the MP40, maybe to its damage range, maybe to how incendiary rounds work on that, because that's a very, very popular setup right now. You've got the MP40 with the very easy to use mags in the Gorenko rounds, but then you add incendiary on top of that, and it is a melt machine, quite literally, right? So that's one I definitely keep my eye on. The STG, despite being the second most used weapon in the game with an 8% pick ratio, I don't feel like that one is too incredibly broken or in need of much tuning. It basically has identical stats to the Cold War AK with slightly better recoil in my opinion, but as far as the damage goes, it's basically 1 for 1. So I don't really see that one potentially changing all that much. The MW car really hasn't moved much, but it's still the 3rd most picked sniper in the game, despite receiving some nerfs with the whole Pacific update. Obviously, its flinch is a whole lot more worse now, but I also feel like the MW car, where it's at right now, should really be the gold standard in the bar for how snipers should work, right? Like, I don't feel like it's ridiculously overpowered, whereas in previous seasons, that and the Swiss pretty much dominated the meta and were used more than any other guns in the game. I feel like now we're at a point where snipers are pretty useful to use, but you don't have to have one, despite the map being so open and long-range based. Rifles, LMGs, and other guns really are holding their own, and snipers aren't overly dominant. And with that, I feel like the car, for Modern Warfare at least, is very, very balanced. But if I search up the Kar 98K, it is only a 1% pick rate right now, and it is the 18th most popular weapon. The 3-line and the Type 99 are also very underwhelming as it stands right now. I feel like all the Vanguard snipers in specific are going to receive some pretty solid buffs so that they can be bumped up to compete with the MW car, even with the Swiss, even though that's not like, insanely good anymore because the damage nerfs and whatnot to it. All the Vanguard snipers I feel like are going to receive some pretty solid buffs. Raven's already gone out and mentioned that they're going to adjust ADS times in the future. So especially with how bad the ADS times are on the Vanguard snipers in particular, I think we're going to see some pretty drastic changes there that should in general increase the overall efficiency of all 3 Vanguard snipers, all 4 I guess, because the PTRS as well, and we should see some shifts in the meta because of that. Now the Bren is the 4th most popular gun in the game. It's got a 5% pick rate, and that's on the uptick as well, so that's increasing. But also, if we go ahead and we look at the KD ratio and we sort it by that, it is the number 2 gun behind the double barrel. Don't worry, more on that here in just a moment, but it's got a 1.43 KD ratio right now, which in terms of ranged weapons is unheard of. Even if we look at these other guns, the EM2, which was so popular for so long, that has a 1.2 KD. The MP40 from Vanguard, 1.18, the OTS 109, a 1.43 is very, very high for a weapon, and coinciding with the fact that it is just that easy to use and the KD is that high with it because it is a laser beam at all ranges because the Royal Barrel and also has insane damage. Its pick rate and its KD ratio, I would imagine from Raven's standpoint, are maybe getting a little bit on that side of this probably should be toned down a little bit. I would not be surprised at all if the Bren gets a nerf. I don't think it's really if, I think it's when, if I'm being honest with you guys. The Bren is definitely one that I would have on my top priority for, hey, this is probably going to get tuned. Sure, you can level it up now and use it for a bit, but do not be upset if it gets nerfed in, a couple of days from now once they're back in office and the updates are rolling through again, because that one is really everyone seems like go-to weapon right now. Now, to that same point, the double barrel, while it has a terrible pick rate, 0.4%, has an even higher KD, 1.5. And if you've seen the clips, the Akimbo double barrel is basically the snake shots, the Magnum snake shots from back in the day, which were incredibly broken. The double barrel is essentially the same thing, but just in the form of a shotgun. It's probably the single most broken setup in the game right now. Another one that I think is almost guaranteed to get a nerf at this point, right? It's just patterns. We've seen a weapon just like this before. It got nerfed pretty quickly. This is going to be the same case here just because it is too overwhelmingly dominant in close range fights. Nothing can compete with the Akimbo double barrels right now, so those are absolutely going to receive a nerf at some point here soon. Following the Bren though, we got the Swiss as the 5th most popular weapon. I don't really see any changes potentially happening to that. They've already nerfed it pretty severely, so that's sort of in a solid place, I'd say. The Cooper Carbine is an interesting one because they definitely nerfed its close range efficiency, and it's not the greatest close range AR SMG hybrid gun anymore. At a range, they also adjusted it a bit, so it's just viable in a lot of different ways. You could use it with the 45 round mags, you could use it with the 60 round mags. It's pretty solid either way, but I don't feel like the Cooper is particularly broken in any major way. Then we get into some of the more interesting ones. The Cold War AK, I feel like could still potentially receive some nerfs just because it is a mimic of the STG, and in terms of a business model, obviously they want people to jump on Vanguard as much as possible, and they want the Vanguard guns to be good, even though they're still pushing a balanced meta at the same time. If you have one from an older game though, that could cause a problem. So for business reasons, I wouldn't be surprised if the Cold War AK ends up getting a nerf at some point here soon. I don't think the Grau will ever receive a touch here, or any tuning in really any regard, just because it's really not all that powerful. People just use it for fully loaded when it comes down to it as their MW fully loaded gun. The bar, I feel like, is higher risk, higher reward. That sits in a good place to me. And then surprisingly, the Kilo is in the top 10 still. I think for the same reason as the Grau, people are using that as their fully loaded main weapon for that. Or they're easy rifles to use. No recoil, laser beams, not insane TTKs, but they get the job done. And if you want to use an MW weapon, those are two of the better choices there. So really, I feel like surprisingly, most of the tuning here could potentially be coming to the Vanguard weapons once again to actually nerf them and make those a little bit more in line with some of the other top meta weapons that seem pretty balanced at the moment. But yeah, with all that being said, that is pretty much going to wrap things up for today. That's what I would expect for these future meta updates, just based off of what they've gone ahead and nerfed in the past or buffed in the past based off of previous patterns and things that we looked at in this video between the pick rate and the KD. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, let me know by dropping a like on it. It would be seriously appreciated. And of course, if you're new to the channel or if you have not already subscribed, this is the best place to be for everything going on in COD, between news, updates, loadouts, tips. I got you covered every single day. So feel free to subscribe with your notifications turned on. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, take it easy. Have an awesome rest of your day. I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.